All right, hello and welcome back to this joint podcast. This is Aleks Salkin, the Hebrew Hammer Cast, and Pat Flynn, the Pat Cast. I've often thought it should be called, but I guess it's just still called the Pat Flynn Show. My ideas were not,
Firmly rejected.
yeah, firmly rejected, received, reviewed, and denied. I believe Pat
Mhm.
told me as he laughed menacingly in my
Well,
face.
it didn't have the classic Aleks Salkin Flynn pun
You're right.
feature that I am so fond of.
But you know something? I have come up with a bevy of new ones at the end of the show, I'll tell you.
Stay
Uh,
tuned to the end of the episode, my friends.
yes.
This will not
One of them
disappoint.
is only going to be useful until your next child is born. Um, so I'll leave you with
Okay,
that.
I'm going to stick around just to hear
Yes.
that.
Yes,
Good.
please do. So we'll go ahead and kick things off on the topic that was sent to me by none other than Matthew Mancuso, who is also going through the Strong On certification, and he's gone through your Fight Club Physique, which seems to have been a very, very popular offering. A lot of people are loving it. I've been checking out what's been
Yeah, man. Nothing like offering a program uh, you know, about a movie that was what like
20 something
25
years.
years
Yeah.
ago or something like that. Just trying to, stay hip to pop culture.
You know what's funny though is that if I'm not mistaken, first of all, I think most guys actually like Brad Pitt's physique more than like let's say the Arnold Schwarzenegger physique when they think about what they want to look like. But
Yeah.
I remember I think years ago I read something that said that even women preferred that physique.
I'm biased because I don't look like Arnold Schwarzenegger, but I think there's the thing that makes that believable is not only do I think that, the Fight Club physique, if you will, that class. Who's calling me on a home phone? I have a home phone. I have a home phone. Do you hear
No,
that? Apparently, I have a home phone. Well, I can't
miracles
turn it off.
abound.
So yeah,
Yeah,
I have one of those things. I had no
yeah,
idea. I didn't even know they still existed. Anyways, so the Fight Club physique, the classic martial arts physique, I mean, it's inherently aesthetically pleasing, no doubt,
yeah,
that sort of lean, hard look. But I think people might be more attracted to that because it's also just believable in a way that like Conan the Barbarian isn't. I like even most people who don't know a whole lot about fitness, like look at like Schwarzenegger in his prime. Like, yeah, right.
yeah,
But something like Brad Pitt's physique and Fight Club, or just even Bruce Lee's physique, very impressive. Nobody's going to deny it. Like, yeah, that it would be sweet to look and perform like that. But I think there's also just, difficult, yes, but believable and attainable for a lot of people without a whole bunch of drugs and the world's absolutely best genetics. Also, yes. So I think maybe that's a factor that plays it. Certainly, it's true for me. Like, I was always pretty realistic. Like, I'm never going to be a bodybuilder for many reasons, like
yeah.
Schwarzenegger. But I'm into martial arts. I've been doing martial arts my whole life, so that kind of inclined me towards a certain aesthetic, anyways. And it just seemed like, yeah, that's actually in the realm of possibility. So I'm going to
Yeah.
go there. Mhm.
Yeah, I think so too. I think I remember years ago somebody was talking about Andy Bolton, who was the first guy to deadlift over 1,000 pounds in competition. And he said, when you look at Andy, he's like 350 pounds, so he almost doesn't seem real. Like it's hard to really fathom. I mean, it's like, and on the one hand, you're like, yeah, I could see a guy like that lifting that much weight, but you can't see yourself in that person because he's just so colossal. He's just larger than life. And people can see themselves in like people can't see themselves looking like Schwarzenegger because yeah, he basically that was his career was to look like that. Whereas, if you eat right, you train well, you do something outside of just lifting weights like martial arts, like you pointed out, you can get a physique that looks pretty good and that is actually not just attainable, but still enviable. And
Yeah, and you don't have to take steroids just to,
exactly,
just to be upfront about it, right?
exactly.
And that was always an attractive feature to me, right? Not having to use enhancements.
Yes, exactly. Especially, you know what? I get it. I get the whole using enhancements thing if it's like your job. But what I find crazy is people using vitamin S when they're not even getting paid for it. It's like
Oh
you
yeah, man.
for no reason. You're like, like an accountant and you just
You just got to have that
awesome.
Instagram, that Instagram going, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. For all your 2,000 followers, like, that's an awful lot of endocrine disruption going on for,
Yeah,
you know.
man. Definitely a
But
conversation worth having for another
yes,
time, but many
correct.
downsides to that, to be sure.
Absolutely. But at any rate, getting getting this conversation back on the rails, if at all possible, which I think we should be able to do. I think we're
Mhm.
pretty seasoned at this. Mr. Mancuso asked, he said like, I'm amazed that you guys were able to teach at the same certification, given how different your methods are, because he's very familiar with your work. He's very familiar with my work. And, it's funny because I've always thought that what we do is pretty complementary. And the reason that
Yes.
it's complementary is because it's so different. And that's what makes
Mhm.
it easy for us to be able to collaborate and things of that nature. But I can see what he's saying from an outside perspective, where it's
Yeah, it
like,
looks like you do very different stuff than I
exactly,
do.
exactly.
Totally. Hmm.
But what is it you would say, given that you're pretty familiar with my material, I'm pretty familiar with yours. If we had to break it down, what would we say would be the the overarching reason that we are
Yeah.
able to that we're able to have such different methods, but such similar? Well, I don't want to give away the answer because I already know the answer, but such similar focuses, let's say.
Yeah, good. Okay, so I want to back up a little bit because I think this is a really good question that will allow us to explore an important theme or topic, and it's the idea of, principles versus specifics, and how things can look different, maybe superficially, but they actually have a lot of harmony substantially.
Hmm.
But the reverse can be true. Things could look quite similar superficially, like somebody could, person A could be using barbells, person B could be using barbells, but substantially in how the barbells are used, the programming, the workout design, etc., they could actually be more dissimilar, right? Than person A using kettlebells and person B using body weight, but they're adhering towards the same set of principles that we both agree on are the necessary principles for success.
Hmm.
I think that's really the heart of it. I mean, the major difference between me and you is the particular modality
Hmm.
that we choose to train with and train other people with. I'm largely, but not exclusively, a kettlebell guy, and you are largely, but not exclusively, a bodyweight guy, just
Hmm.
as other people might be largely, but not exclusively, barbells or dumbbells or whatever. And the first thing I want to say here is, these modalities are particular tools, and each tool in fitness often has a killer application. Like it tends to be like really great at one or two things in particular, and it might also be more limited than other tools. So, for example, the barbell is, I mean, its killer app is like you want a big deadlift, the barbell, you're just not going to beat it, right? Um, but the barbell is not always the most convenient or accessible piece of equipment for people. One of the reasons that I love training with kettlebells is because I think it's sort of like the Swiss Army knife of functional fitness. Like for most people, most of the time, it's going to get you all the fitness results you can want. I wouldn't use it if you're trying to train to be a professional powerlifter. That's not its killer function. But for general physical preparedness, man, it just does a lot of things really well, and it has a compact nature. It's very efficient. You can do strength work, muscle work, metabolic conditioning. It's a great mobility tool, as you know. And I'd actually make a similar case for body weight, right? Body weight is also an extremely versatile tool. It's hard to find anything more convenient than body weight, right? I mean, yeah, it probably helps to have a set of rings or a pull-up bar to really explore the range of benefits for body weight training. Uh, are you going to be able to build as much raw lower body strength with body weight as you would a kettlebell? I'm sorry, as you would a barbell for deadlifts? Probably not realistically. But then you have to ask, does that even matter for most people most of the time? And for both of us, I think we're more, interested in training, everyday people who want to be strong, but not the strongest, who want to be muscular, but not the most muscular. And
Hmm.
that doesn't mean that they still can't be impressive. I think we make people very impressive, but we're more interested in forming, well-rounded generalists than we are hyper specialists. And so what we're doing is we're adhering to a common set of shared principles about, exercise selection and variable management and training frequency and, appropriate stimulus and how to wave loads. And we just understand that how you put these principles into practice can vary. So I'll turn it over to you in a second. But here's the cool thing about, I think, exercise science is it's not just science. There's a lot of art there too. The science part comes down to the principles. Okay, you want to build muscle. Here's what we know you have to do, right? You have to, have a certain amount of volume, maybe, 10 to 20 sets per major muscle group per week. You need to have a certain amount of intensity, within maybe 2 reps of technical failure or right to failure. And there's these principles, right? Like these are the things that have been scienced, and science is usually just a lot of times, but not always, confirming bro science. Sometimes it corrects bro science, but a lot of times, like a lot of this stuff was kind of already known, right?
Yeah.
For the most part, right? But then the art comes into, okay, how are we going to put these principles into practice for the person that we are trying to serve, which might just be ourselves, right? And this is where we can have a rather large range of options, including how to accommodate various preferences and lifestyles. Okay, can we accomplish these principles with body weight training?
Hmm.
By and large, yes, we can. Can we get these principles into practice with kettlebells? By and large, yes, we can. Yes, 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 yes. So the point I'm trying to emphasize is that it's the principles certainly that we hold in common for getting certain physical outcomes, and that we just serve kind of different people, and maybe it divides purely across preferences. I mean, that really could be it. I mean, there's just a lot of people who just really like to train just with their own body weight. Awesome.
Hmm.
And that's super effective with the right principles. There's also a lot of people, most people come to me, who just really like training with kettlebells. Awesome. That's super effective if you share the right principles. So what I'm saying is, yes, on the surface, it might look like me and Aleks are doing very different things. And we are, in terms of, the exercise selection and the tool being used. But
Hmm.
if you look underneath the hood at the underlying core principles, you'll see that we're actually very, very similar, if not in some senses identical. Is that, is
Yeah,
that, that right, my good sir?
it's spot on. And actually, one of the things, we didn't even really discuss this too much before we started. We just kind of hit the record button and let it roll. But you mentioned something that
We
I
don't need
told,
scripts.
yeah, exactly. Scripts are for the weak.
Mhm.
We do this completely off the cuff. And one of the things that similarly I said off the cuff in my response to him was that, you know, there's an art and a science to training. And so the science, Pat and I pretty much agree on, because it's like there's not a lot of room for disagreement. It's like there are some things that we know work and that pretty much all major authorities in the matter can agree on. The art really comes into how you apply it. And then it also comes into how you apply it to the population that you're helping. And for me in particular, this is one of the reasons I always get a laugh at like the science-based crew. It's like they won't do anything. I mean, they're really extreme among them. Just, well, yeah, exactly. Well, according to this study by blah blah blah. It's like, okay, but there have been people doing stuff like this for a lot longer, and there's at least enough anecdotal evidence that you should be like, yeah, why not give it a shot? It still it still adheres to these principles. So let's just see if it actually is
Yeah,
a
you're
good
not gonna
application of them.
if you're looking for a peer-reviewed study to confirm absolutely everything, well, there's no peer-reviewed study confirming my first name or where I was born. So, right.
Yeah, so you're gonna have
At
to take
some,
his word for it.
but the point is like a good coach, and this is not to discount the great research, but a good coach is always kind of blending different things, right? Okay, what does the literature say? What is the best science that we have? But also, what have I learned from both my experience and the experience of people who've really been in the game for a while and have done an awesome job
Yeah.
at it, right? And that it should not be discounted. It should be, set in light of the wider, scientific research and stuff like that. But these things should be, of course, informing not just each other, but your personal practice and your the art of coaching as well, right? And then you and because not every single question is answered in the literature, there's going to be times when you just kind of have to run experiments, well educated experiments within the bounds of the things that we do know. But that's a perfectly legitimate and cool thing to do, and that's where a lot of learning opportunity will come from, in terms of how you develop as a coach and what you find actually works in the trenches with everyday people in real life, and what does it. There's always going to be, no matter how much you study, right? There's always going to be some aspect of trial and error. And your responsibility of a coach is to, double up on the winners and cut the losers over time. That's how you refine your practice. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it was Charles Poliquin who said that the people who are only going to rely on what the scientific research says are probably going to end up being 20 to 30 years behind, because the people who are doing the stuff that is getting the great results now are they don't have any scientific research behind it. They have their experience, and he's talking specifically about strength coaches and people who are working with athletes. But I think that the same idea holds true for a lot of other things. I mean, when the kettlebell burst onto the scene in the West in the early 2000s, really wasn't a whole. I mean, there was Soviet research on it. There was not a whole lot of American research, but it took I want to say probably 10 or so years before there were any peer-reviewed studies on the efficacy of kettlebell training. But people,
And what did most of those do? If people look at the literature on this, and I've refreshed myself because I have this strong on book coming out, so I was
yeah,
like, okay, well, it mostly just confirmed the obvious. Do these things with
exactly.
kettlebells that you think would get result X, and as it happens, it tends to get result X, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So that's the thing is that there's an art and a science to really any discipline. I mean, it's the same thing with guitar, I would bet, is that I mean, I know it's like this for bass and it's essentially like there are some things it's like you're going to have to get good at, the timing or the tempo, you're going to have to get good at all the basic building blocks of making music, but then the art is how you put those building blocks together and turn it into something that gets the result that you're after, something eminently listenable. And it's exact same thing with strength training. You can have all the right principles in place and have it be like something that people just simply can't complete because it's too challenging. Or
Yeah.
you can have the right principles in place, but then also have enough artistic license with whatever program it is that you've designed that people not only are capable of finishing it, but they really want to finish whatever the program is.
Man, that's really funny. I didn't, I usually like to draw music analogies because for people who don't know, Dad likes to play the guitar and has for a long time. But man, I couldn't imagine like, I'm like 14-year-old Pat pushing up my glasses. My guitar instructor says, Pat, I need you to practice with a metronome more. Huh? You have a study to back that up?
Um, I'm gonna need a peer-reviewed study, preferably a meta study.
Now I'm just like out of pure curiosity. I wish to see if there's some, but like I never would have thought of like looking for the research to back up the efficacy of playing with a metronome. But just like, hey, these great players all tell me that this is something you need to do, so I'm just gonna do it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's hard for me to say how strong the similarities are structurally between the music world and the fitness world. I mean, there's a lot of kooks in the music world as there are in the fitness world, promising little shortcuts and gimmicks, and
Yeah.
rather than just saying, no, here are the principles, go do the hard work, right? Because
Yeah.
nobody wants to be told that in the music world any more than they do in the fitness world. So there's definitely a lot of similarities like that. But yeah, right. And really, in both worlds, it comes down to okay, what are the principles of effective practice? And then how do I apply those principles consistently and put in good hard effort? Right. I mean, just like the principle for getting stronger is like you have to work against, appropriate stimulus and progressive resistance. Same thing in music, man. Like you want to get faster, you better start pushing that metronome. 2 points of technical failure. And there's actually quite a similarity there, right? You don't want to push it so fast that you're just producing pure slop, but you do need to push yourself where you are like really challenged, like, maybe hitting it like 8 out of 10 times, that point of like very close to breakdown. That's how you grow. I mean, the body just responds to challenge and stimulus in both areas. So I don't know where I'm going with it. It's just interesting to kind of note, how many similarities there are on the fly. Wackos in both industries trying to sell you a bunch of, you
Hooey.
know, uh, potions and stuff like that definitely don't work. But at the same time, like, honestly, guys, the stuff that works is not some like crazy mystical secret. It's the stuff that you've probably already heard a million times. But unfortunately, it's kind of boring, and most people just don't want to do it.
Yeah, how many times you hear the story about like somebody who goes to a personal trainer or whatever, and they're like, "Yeah, do X, Y, and Z," and they're like, "Well, why am I paying you for this? I already know that." It's like, "Well, did you do it?" Well, no. It's like this is
Yeah,
your entrance. Like the only way you're gonna get into the building that you're asking to get into is to go through this door.
yeah.
It's the only door.
And,
Okay.
and this goes to show is that the coach maybe is more valuable on the art side than the science side. Here's the science. Eat protein, manage and cycle your calories, use progressive resistance, waive your training loads, focus on the big major compound lifts to facilitate a high degree of neuromuscular facilitation, blah, blah, blah. Like a monkey could learn that stuff, right? In like 10 minutes. the real difficulty, like, and Alex, we talk about like these gun to head scenarios. Like you put a gun to somebody's head, be like, you tell me what healthy eating is, right? Most people would be able to do it, right? Like,
Yeah.
they generally have a decent idea of what it is. The problem is getting it done. The
Yeah.
problem, of course, is how do I get myself to consistently put these principles into practice? And that, I think, is where truly great coaches stand out, right? That they have ways, methods, approaches of getting these principles into practice so that way they are effective and sustainable. And man, that is really an art form.
Yeah.
And a lot of it can only be learned in the trenches.
Yeah.
Yes, you can study and you should study, the various psychological aspects of coaching. That's something a coach has to understand. But a lot of it is just there's things, Alex, that I know, that you know, that many coaches in the game know, that we know we only could know through experience, like swinging a cat by its tail, right? It teaches you. There's things that teaches you,
Yeah.
right? That you're not going to learn about in a book, right? And what it teaches you, you'll never forget.
Not soon anyway. That's usually a pretty quick and somewhat bloody lesson very often. No, you're 100% correct. I think really the big art form, and it's interesting that you mentioned this too, that it's even more art because that's sort of the conclusion I've come to. I had a guy on my podcast, is a Norwegian hypertrophy expert, Børge Fagerli, said the exact same thing, and he really knows the science. He's like knows it better. He'll probably forget more than either of us will ever know. And he said, I think a lot of, I think it was, he said coaching and then training is, I think it's more science than, I'm sorry, I think it's more art than science. Because you just have to manage what people like, what they're willing to do, what they can do, what their equipment availability is, what their uh, schedule is like. It's like there's not going to be a peer-reviewed study for any of that stuff.
And you're just going to have to make some, like, judgment calls
Yeah,
based upon prior experience and understanding. Like, you have to form prudence, which is, the kind of practical wisdom. Judgment calls of like, okay, when do I give the tough love versus, be more of the consoling, encouraging? Like, these are both of those can be effective in different situations. And an experienced coach needs to learn through experience of like when those types of judgments need to be made, because you know if you get that wrong, that's kind of significant. So right, yeah, good.
excellent. Well, very good. Any parting thoughts before we go and crush
No,
week?
bro, I think we just annihilated this question.
Fantastic. So where can people find you online?
Yes, very good. Well, I actually got a new kettlebell channel out called Kettlebell Quickies.
Ah,
So if
yeah.
you want to head over and check out some time efficient kettlebell training workouts and kettlebell training advice, check out Kettlebell Quickies on YouTube. Otherwise, my usual spot is chroniclesofstrength.com.
Check them both out. And of course, folks, you can always get my 9-minute kettlebell and bodyweight challenge at 9minutechallenge.com. Even if you're brand new to kettlebells, even if you already have a workout that you're doing, it's designed to complement, not complicate your training. So you can tack it on to whatever you're doing before, after, whatever you'd like. 9minutechallenge.com. Check Pat out, Kettlebell Quickies on YouTube, and chroniclesofstrength.com. I believe you are still giving people an insanely generous 101 kettlebell workouts if they go there.
Yes.
Isn't
Yes.
that
Thank
correct?
you, good sir. Actually, if you just go to 101, the number's 101 kettlebellworkouts.com, you can scoop that right up. So totally free.
Excellent. Highly recommended, folks. It's very, very good stuff. Pat, thank you again for coming on the show.
Thanks, dude. We'll talk to you soon. Peace.
Absolutely. Take care.